Welcome everybody to this month's Idea Challenge. My name is Ashley Proctor and I work with Coworking Canada and the Idea Project to produce the annual Coworking Conference in Canada. And I'm here today with Mark Navarro, who I'll let introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Mark. I do many things co-working related, but I'm mainly here because I'm the content manager of CWSC, which is the co-working conference that takes place in Spain. And I also created the Flexwork Academy, which is a co-working conference, but in a small format workshop kind of thing, which happens also in Spain for the moment.
Yeah, and over both of our careers, we have a lot of experience producing industry events and content for the co-working world. So it's really fitting that we're issuing the challenge together here today. For those who are not familiar with the Idea Project, just a bit of background. The Idea Project is an informal but essential collaboration between co-working operators and event producers and associations and collectives around the world who are committed to making the co-working industry and our co-working events and spaces more inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible. And each month we issue a challenge to the co-working world and beyond to think about some of these topics and to work together to make improvements in our spaces and at our events worldwide. So the topic for this month's challenge is really around inclusion and accessibility at industry events. And the reason that this topic came about was because I recently actually got to attend the incredible Co-working Spain conference in Madrid. This conference has been going on for a long time, and Mark can tell you more about it, but I finally had the chance to attend, and it was really an incredible opportunity, but that was only possible because there was English translation, and it makes sense that a local conference would be in the local language. Because of the translation availability, I was also able to participate. So that was a really incredible experience I can talk more about later, but I'll hand it over to you, Mark, to talk a bit about the event itself.
Yeah, CWC this year edition, it was the 13th edition. So it's quite a long journey. The English level in Spain is improving, but it's not the best. So it's a conference that it started in Spanish. And back in the 2019 edition, we decided to start having translation. We have two tracks. One track that is the main track that lasts the whole 2 days of the conference. And then we have a secondary track that takes place in some parts of the day. And we only translate the main track, and that with a little bit of tinkering, it gets 80%, well, actually like 78.7% of the content translated, but it's enough to make you feel that the conference it's enough, it's translated enough that it's worth traveling. So that's the story. I can like talk about this for hours, so maybe keep it back and forth. So if you feel that there's something interesting that catch your eye when you visited and actually you have been part of it, just we can develop in that.
Yeah, no, I would agree that even though not everything was translated into English, I was able to participate fully. And there were a couple of times where I wish I could have been in a different track because there were either people I knew on stage or a panel I was interested in that wasn't translated, but it didn't compromise my experience at all. I think I really love that it was in the local language. I think a lot of local conferences should be produced locally by experts in the local community, and that this knowledge should be shared out around the world. That's really what I think makes our industry unique, is that we share our best practices and we share all of our learning. So what's interesting to me about the event is that in so many ways it's diverse and inclusive and representative of different regions and levels of experience, the big players, the little guys, new people to the industry. And that diversity is really strong. And I've been hearing for years that was a very similar trait to the Co-working Canada conference, which I have the privilege of producing. But to see it for myself was really quite special, and I agree with all the feedback I've received. It is quite a diverse event.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that you and me come from a similar background in some way, but also like locally in the sense that in Canada you have two official languages, and I'm from Barcelona, I'm from Catalonia, and we have also Spanish, which is official language, and we have like all other like I don't know the technical name, but it's like co-official languages.
Mhm.
So I speak both, right? So back in 2018, actually, at that moment, someone I met in CWSC, I asked her about having the conference in English. And I love her reply to my question, because what she said me, it was like, no, you can't do it in English, because part of the experience is to see how you see things, how you explain things, and how you live things. Because Spaniards are, sometimes a little bit louder than other nations, and we are maybe more expressive in some way, right? So, as you said, like things have to develop locally, right? But at the end, it's a shame that more people cannot attend because they don't have that language skill. So we end up from 2018 to 2019 choosing to translate part of the conference and start working on the program. So it's more difficult, of course, but you start like tweaking the program in a way that you achieve that 80%, which is enough. Because during that year I have been talking to other people in other local conferences around Europe, like, hey, how much do you feel it's enough or the bare minimum to attend? So 50%, it was not worth it because you're going to miss another 50%. So I ended up like, okay, 80% seems, like enough. I would love to have 100% translated. I would love to, right? And on the other hand, what you get is that when you have international speaker that speaks in English, it's also translated to Spanish, right? So
Mhm.
for the attendees that are not skilled enough to fully understand the whole thing, it also improves, because at the end, if you're not very confident in a language, then your brain gets much more exhausted, like much faster. So having like 4 or 5 talks in a language that you don't fully control, it makes it very impossible to get to the end of the day with like being mentally not insane.
It is quite a struggle to even to go through the translation process when you're hearing multiple languages at once, or when you're trying to interact with people in a second language or a third language. And folks were apologizing to me all day about their English, and I was just so impressed that they could speak English in addition to other languages, which to me is an incredible feat in itself. So I think that having the conversation about translation at events also sort of breaks the ice a little bit, so people know that like we're just meeting where we can meet because we want to talk to each other, we want to learn from each other, we want to get to know each other better, and that what we're doing is making an accommodation so that more people can participate, more people feel welcome and included, and it is possible. So that's an example of an accommodation I think that could be making at a lot of these international conferences, and that I really hope we can do a better job of at Co-working Canada, and not just when we have events in French-speaking locations, but across the board. We're always trying to trying out new widgets and plugins and things to make the websites multilingual and to give options to folks who have other kinds of disabilities, who might need some accommodations in terms of participating in online events. But it's hard to do 100%, and I know a part of that challenge is not just that many of us are volunteers or working with very small teams to produce these events year after year, um, but that it's expensive. It's a real cost, and it works both ways. It's not just translating one way; it's translating multiple ways. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the expense of it, as an event producer, how that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive, as you mentioned. I mean, and the reason why we are translating only one track, it's because of that, right? Because basically, if you have to translate both tracks, you have to pay double, more or less. That's one thing. Yeah, it costs a lot of money. At some point, there will be, I guess, AI automated translation with Get or whatever. I think we are not that there yet. I hope that this it will. I mean, it will be one of the greatest things of AI that I will celebrate a lot. But I mean, currently there's like the cost of the professionals that are translating and that are guaranteeing the message that it gets to the attendees. It's true and it's correct and everything it's as it should be. So they have the same experience. You're providing the same experience. But for sure, then depending on the kind of venue you have also to pay for the. They need like a special phone booths, which are like really isolated, and they have their tech stuff. And then you have to also rent the equipment, right? That the people is using. Then, fun fact, we had in one edition someone that took the small device back home. She texted me from the train, "Hey, I have this with me." And I was like, oh my God, because she left before the event finished. So we didn't know at that time. And well, she posted, she sent it by post and everything was fine. But it's like, it's not only the salary of the people doing the job, but it's also the technical stuff. And that can be quite expensive at the end. In 2018, it was fully supported by one sponsor, which take the whole cost of the translation, and it made it possible because as an organizer, I mean, you are taking a risk, right? Because you can end up, losing money. And then I mean, once you get to that point, it's difficult for you to like move back because it's a feature that you like. It makes the event more accessible. I think that it makes sense how the industry is shaping. It makes sense that local conferences are more accessible, and the reason why is because basically and that's my opinion. I don't know how you will feel about it, but the industry is like splitting in two ways, and there are like common points between, let's say, the true or original co-working and the flexwork solution, right? Are more like real estate, like more business oriented in that sense. And for sure there are spaces which are with one foot on both, right? So it's interesting for people to attend, but then sometimes maybe in your country there's an event which is like more real estate or it's more co-working, the original flavor, let's call it, right? And then it does not appeal exactly to you. But then when you are, for example, consulting around the world, you realize that the same problems you have in Barcelona, maybe you have them in Vancouver. And the problems you have in a town 30 kilometers away from Barcelona are the same ones that someone have in the coast of Bali, right? So it makes sense that someone from France attends to a CWC, or someone from, I don't know, Mexico City attends to a Co-working Canada conference, if the values of that conference is aligned, if the content is worth it, right? Because not all the conferences are made equal. But again, yeah, this requires a lot of money.
Yeah, I think you're right about the importance of learning from other regions. And I think there's a big value in attending conferences that are not always close to home, that could be online as well as in person. And so I think it's important to have the online opportunity to consider all kinds of inclusion around accessibility and ASL and other kinds of interpretation, even in the captions, multiple languages. And it gets a bit easier to do that more economically. But in person, the expenses are real, like you were saying, and the venue is also extremely important. It really limits the number of venues you can work within if you're looking for a physically accessible venue, if you're looking for a venue that's already outfitted for translation at all the seats. The venue that you recently had in Madrid was fantastic, and I could see the quality, I could see the experience, and also I could see that there was a lot of thought put for the experience of the translator, which is important. They're working so hard all day long, nonstop, that they have the right equipment and the right venue to support them in their work. So I know there's real cost there, and I think that it's important that we think about this collectively, because as organizers, it's important for us to talk to each other as well about the things we struggle with, the things that we're working towards, the ways we're trying to improve our local events. And I think that this multiple languages and translation is really an important part of that. So perhaps Co-working Canada, as a nonprofit organization, working with the IDEA Project, a nonprofit initiative, and working with the European Co-working Assembly, for example, could put a real effort together into finding some funds through grants or sponsorship to ensure that these local or regional industry events are made accessible to others if they wish to be translated or to have multiple languages available at these events, online and in person.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, for us, it was a game changer to have someone who can, you know, help us to do it the first year, because it's hard to do, and then you always, you know, try to keep an eye about how many, like, international, like, English speaking tickets you are selling, because, you know, at the end it's, you know, it's difficult, right? Because you have a cost that is there, and at least you want, you know, to get it back, the same amount of money you are investing. It's not that you want to make a lot of money out of it, out of the translation, because, you know, like, spreading what you're doing. In my case, I consider that it's enough. But on the other hand, you know, you have to keep the finance of the project balanced, and you know, and you have to make it work. So for sure, any kind of help in this sense, to bigger events, to smaller events, for sure, at some point you get into some like economic, depending on the price of the ticket. That must be a must-have, right? But if you keep the events affordable, right, and the number of attendees, it's not huge, then it's something that it will make a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess this month and the challenge is has multiple angles, and so I guess the challenge would be to event organizers to prioritize this kind of inclusion online and in person. But we understand there's a business case and that there's sustainability required to keep these events going, and so we also would challenge the alliances and organizations to work together to either secure some grant funding or compile some funds to ensure that events around the world are made more inclusive with translation where we can, and online ASL interpretation and other accessibility features. And also a challenge to sponsors of these events. I know some events have scholarship funds where we make tickets available to folks who couldn't afford them otherwise. Same thing with speaking fees for folks who need to travel far, or for folks with accessibility needs, where we can make their experience more functional or for them. So to challenge sponsors to also really prioritize making translation and these inclusive measures a priority.
Yeah, I would like to add something on top of what you say, or inspired in what you say. I also run the Flexible Academy. It's a Spanish only. It's a much smaller event, so we cannot afford translation. But also regarding, well, you know, like, I don't take care usually take care of sponsorships. There's other people that do that. But in the academy, the team is tiny, so I do that. And at the end, it's like the relationship you have with the sponsors. can be like, send them the deck, copy whatever is being done, or you have been, seeing all over, in other events, whatever. But on the other hand, it's like, I think it's a relationship that it's based on added value to both sides, and in my opinion, to impact the attendee, right? So I would also, it's like, it's what you said, it's like you challenge the sponsors, but I think that also the organizers should be challenged too, in the sense that it's not about providing something, take the money and run, in that sense. But it's, at the end, it's like how you create this value for the sponsor. It can be done in really different ways, right? So for sure, there's one which is a sponsor the whole budget of the needed for the translation, but there are other ways in which the money of a sponsor can bring them exposure and position the brand. And I'm usually, when you see a deck of other conferences that sometimes I'm sent, I'm astonished by the lack of imagination. And at the end, it's like, you approach the sponsor like, hey, I have a crazy idea. And sometimes they say yes. I mean, you have to go to the right sponsor for that. And on the other hand, I tell any sponsor, if you have an idea about something we can do together, right? It's like, let's do it, let's chat about it. Of course, I'm trained as a designer, so I kind of like this kind of thinking of, creating something bespoke and something which, it's tailored for that kind of company, that kind of vibes, of values, etc. But on the other hand, of course, there are certain red lines, right? It's like I cannot be damaging a third party, but something I'm offering to another sponsor, right? But if you keep that in mind, everything will go fine. And it will cost you more work, I guarantee you that. But I think it's worth it to think about it and don't treat it as a transactional relationship, which is it in some way, but you can make it in something different. So I think that it's a challenge for the conference organizer. It's like, it's, something that both sponsors plus conference organizers can be challenged and can work together in making, in this case, conferences more accessible, and to help, more people go to the event and feel that event is actually talking to them.
Yeah. And I think as well, because our audience is mainly co-working operators, and they're also producing a lot of events within their space. Sometimes there isn't a need for language translation to make an event more inclusive if everyone's local or everyone's in the space speaking the same language to begin with. But I would challenge these operators to just think about ways to make the event, even the registration process, more accessible and inclusive to folks who may have neurodivergent differences, or if anyone is dealing with issues with sight or auditory issues, there may be ways that they can participate better in events. And that might look as simple as in the registration process or in a Zoom sign up to just ask, is there anything that we can do as event organizers to make your experience better or more accessible? And you'll be surprised at the things people write in. It really teaches me a lot about how to make events more inclusive and accessible for folks by simplifying the registration process, or by changing the contrast on the slides, or updating the colors on a website. There are a lot of little things that we could do. So I would suggest people start small in their own spaces and their own events, at the same time as we're challenging industry organizers and producers who have been doing these events for many years now. So is there anything else that you wanted to end with?
No, I love how you nail it. Yeah, because it's true. Sometimes we only think about, big conferences, making the community of co-working managers, community builders together. But you're right, it's something that they can take into their space, and sometimes it's something that it's very easy. I remember the last event I participated in a co-working space. They had a mix of Spaniards, people from Latin America, plus English-speaking people. And the manager asked me, "Could you do both?" So I was like doing like 1, 2 phrases in English and then 1, 2 phrases in Spanish, and it was fun. It worked. People enjoyed it, and everybody had a great time.
Yeah, I love that we can learn these things. When I was on the tours this year, I had a couple of tour guides who were only presenting in Spanish, so a few of the English speakers got together and loosely translated what was happening. We learned a lot, even without being able to hear a lot of the information being shared, but there are such small things, and it would be outrageously exhausting and expensive to make every tour guide bilingual and do that for everyone, but perhaps a smaller English tour or an option to go with a different group where there was an English tour guide. I think there are such small things that come as feedback from each event that we have. And because of that, because of asking the question, because of being open to hearing these suggestions from our participants and attendees and our members, we make better spaces. And they're not just better for the person who brought up the issue, they're better for everyone. So if we are making captions and captions be available in different languages or at different speeds, now the event is accessible to everyone. So I think it's something we can be thinking about at all levels of our work. And I hope this conversation inspires some folks to do some thinking in their own spaces and events over the coming weeks and months. And we'll also have an opportunity in the coming weeks to gather together for a conversation with the IDEA Project and some of our collaborators in seeking funding to ensure that these events are accessible in the future. So we'll see you soon. And there'll be more resources available on the IDEA Project website where you can find all of the past challenges as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, everybody, for waiting till the end of the video.